Welcome to Machine Builder Talk, the podcast where industry leaders, innovators, and visionaries in the industrial machine building world share their insights, challenges, and breakthroughs. Here are your hosts, Colin Cartwright and Craig Henry.
Well, this is it, Colin. We've started it.
We have. We've been talking about this for months now, and we're finally getting to that first episode. Yeah. How's your week been?
It's been fantastic. I've been connected with some really great contacts, which I find my network, that is a key part of me doing my role. And I've met some really interesting people this week. How about you?
You're right. It comes down to relationships. That's what this is. Great relationships get great results. I've been talking to a lot of people this week. I'm excited. I'm going down to a PMMI event next week. What they do for the packaging industry, especially the machine building industry, is phenomenal. They really support their members. I'm looking forward to that.
Fantastic. Well, I have not been connected to PMMI for some time. And in my automation career, certainly worked with palletizers, depalletizers, gantry-based systems, form, fill, seal, all kinds of great machinery, which I've always been fascinated by. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about what the state of the art is there in packaging machinery.
Packaging machines are fascinating. The amount of movement and amount of process that's going on as a product's going through is amazing. Yeah, especially filling and box folding. Some of the box folders are amazing. It's just how they get that box into that shape when it's just a piece of corrugated flat sheet, and it ends up coming with something inside it closed and sealed. That whole process still amazes me.
Yeah, that's a neat technology. Can I use the word neat? Is that a tech term? It's probably not very strong. But the idea that you're going to put something in a box, but you're going to form the box based on its volume, which takes some sophisticated vision, some technology that's relatively new, but it also makes it more efficient. You can pack more on a truck or a boat or whatever you're shipping in. I think that's a great technology. It's very, very sustainable.
Well, it's a multifaceted process because a lot of the time, the product that's going in the back is also getting filled and sealed. Like for a yogurt, for example, Take a yogurt, it's being filled into its carton. The foil top is being put on it. Okay. Yeah. Goes along. It gets collected into 6 or 8 yogurts. They get put into a box, and the box gets sealed, or a cardboard wrapper around the outside. You've probably seen the yogurts that are in 3 or 4 packs.
Yeah, we have it now.
And that gets sealed. That gets put into a box, and all of that process happens within 30, 40 feet. It's incredible.
That is incredible. Does that have to be done in a cooled environment, or can they do that at ambient? Yogurt.
So some of that, you're good question. Some of that has to be done in a cooled area. So the filling part is typically done in a wet area.
Yeah.
Right? So they do that so you can wash down, CIP, so that they're cleaning a place, and usually find a whole bunch of IP69K product in there, stainless steel panels, NEMA 4X, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Stainless steel conveyors.
Food has its own challenges. Yeah. There's a background that I have in motion control where there are certain servo motors that hang above where food is going to be. And even the oil inside the motor, should there be a seal break in the motor, it has to be something that's not toxic.
Exactly. That's contamination. Even plastic parts that can erode away with the chemicals when washed down. And CIP, little tiny granules that you can't even see can get into the food. And obviously that gets contaminated and they've got a bad batch. So that's why stainless steel, which really doesn't break down with these chemicals, is used predominantly in every food and bev type manufacturing process.
That is it.
And that leads on to an interesting thing, actually, because one of the challenges that maintenance people have, or production managers have in these facilities, is water getting into their connections. And at Mirror Electronic, we brought out an IP69K food and beverage module that works great. When a machine builder installs that, screws in the connectors from the sensors, torques it to the perfect amount of torque, and we've got a special torque wrench to do that. That machine leaves the machine builder with everything perfectly sealed. Okay. And what happens is, somewhere down the line, probably 6 months or 8 months later, there's a problem. and a maintenance person undoes the connector at the module. Okay, disconnects it. And then they fix the problem, and then they finger tight that connector back in. All right. And what happens is the seal is not engaged. And so over time, and it can take months for this to happen, water starts seeping into that connection point because it's not been sealed properly and starts eating away at the copper connectors inside. You find that the pins actually start breaking away. And what happens is it starts powdering up. You know how copper starts powdering up when it's corroding. And then all of a sudden it's a problem. And it's funny how often the manufacturer of the IO module, the IP69K module, gets the blame for the problem. You know, and it isn't their problem because the maintenance person didn't tighten that connector properly. And that's how it became contaminated or how it started leaking. So
that's a big problem. People not maintaining their equipment.
Yeah. Well, in those types of environments, Craig, I think, you know, maintenance people should be following procedures like a BMW engine mechanic. You know, you've got to torque everything to a certain torque and everything's got to be assembled in certain order. I mean, if you try to assemble an engine without following the torque settings or take torque guides, you know, that engine's going to start leaking oil and, you know, breaking down in no time. And the same principles work in a food and beverage manufacturing facility.
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that you and I have similar backgrounds in that we have been fortunate enough to be inside so many different manufacturing facilities and warehouses, logistics, packaging lines, that it doesn't necessarily make us an expert in designing a new machine, but it's pretty close. I've done design in my life as well as an engineer, but what we've seen is such a plethora of variety in design, and the environment is a key component of that, as you mentioned here, which some places are super cold. They have these blast freezers that are super cold that actually people have to go in and out of and machinery has to operate at a very cold temperature. Then you've got caustic environments, protein, food, where there are very strict requirements or else someone's going to get sick. It's just the way it is. And then handling of delicate goods, clean room applications, it goes on and on. And the thing that I want to bring out in this podcast is that we've seen some stuff in our years, in our decades of being in this industry, and we want to bring on people and really help understand their stories and their differentiation in the market and just get some insights. This is a community. And so that's what we bring that to the table, is that we've just seen so much.
I agree, absolutely. The whole goal, as we discussed, of this podcast is to bring the machine builders together with a common platform that we can share stories, we can share experiences, we can share the pains and the glories and moments that we have together and get it out there, whether you're just starting off in a machine builder as a controls tech, or if you're starting off as an assembler on site for commissioning projects, or you're the CFO, the CTO, or the engineering manager, or one of the designers. There'll be something on this show for everybody. Every other week, I think we're going to launch with, right? That's what we agreed is every 2 weeks. And so I think at this point in time, talking about bringing guests on, I think we should introduce ourselves, Craig. Do you want to go ahead?
I've been running my mouth and no one knows who I am. That's probably for the best as this plays out. No, I'm kidding. I'm Craig Henry. I got my degree in mechanical engineering, but I think I knew as young as 5 years old, playing with Lego and erector sets and Lincoln Logs. I always liked building things. I wanted to know how they work. And I spent time being an industrial engineer to start with, which was how routings went through a plant. It was a metal cutting facility that did high pressure steam valves mostly for the power production industry. So I did that for a while. I learned CAD CAM and was learning tools of the trade, and also did some CAD work for laying out the plant because we had to do a new design. Then I moved on to pure design and design valves and did new product development. But a friend of mine, and he was in fact my roommate in college, we started an integration company. And that was great fun. And from there, I moved on into a,
Hang on, you started an integration company while you were at school,
no, that was after school. That was after school. So I finished school.
right after school, but you were still a very
I
young
was very
age.
young, of course. You know,
What were you integrating at that
well, at
point?
that
What
point,
kind of machinery?
my friend actually came from a company that did very specific measurement, and it was a magnetostrictive design, a company called MTS. And we were doing primary wood industry stuff, measuring using hydraulic pistons. And most of the lumber work, where someone grabs a tree and debarks it and cuts it up, that is very heavy duty stuff, and it's hydraulics. So we were doing motion control using hydraulics and using these magnetostrictive um, devices. So that's where we started off, and we had our own product, but we also were a distributor for Sick Optic and other companies. So it was great.
Cool, really interesting. Okay.
And then from there, it was such a very fine market. Um, we did some private labeling, and I moved on to the company that was private labeling our products, and that was Patriot Sensors. And then there was a series of events that I went through my career being in sales, which I really liked. I really enjoyed being at the point of need with customers and then solving that need. That was the most exciting thing for me. But as an engineer, I was ready to get in and program it and design it and draw it and troubleshoot it and everything else. So I've never really left that. If you cut me open, I'm still engineer.
You know what? It's funny you say that, because in my 30 years of being as a controls engineer and in sales, I found that typically the best salespeople were the technicians or the engineers beforehand.
Okay.
And it's a really fine line between the personality of an engineer and a personality of a salesperson. It's hard to find someone with both of those skill sets.
Absolutely. I
And
think you're absolutely right.
yeah, and they're very few and far between that get it properly. The best way to help a customer as a salesperson is to solve a problem, but to solve a problem they didn't even know they had. Those are the best ones.
That's it. That's an implicit need, as they call it. I had to go to sales training. I've listened to all kinds of programs, and because sales to me was foreign, and I believe I've become pretty good at it because that's what I do, frankly, Colin. And I think you do the same thing, which is we solve problems. We don't really sell. And I would go as far as to say selling is dead. And we can get into philosophy in a minute, but I think that if you're not solving a problem, whether it's an explicit need or an implicit need, which is let me show you where we can save you money or make this safer or whatever, make it faster, then what are you doing? Because anybody in business or as a consumer, we're so savvy today, we can smell a pitch or a commercial from a mile away, and we don't want to have anything to do with it. We don't want to mess with that.
Yeah, a lot of those old-fashioned sales techniques or closing techniques just fall flat straight away. And we've got more customers now that are educating themselves on our products, our competitors' products, before we even get there. And they know the specifications they're looking for. They know the benefits they're going to get from those specifications or those features. Okay. And really, when you get there, they're already pretty much made their mind up what they want. And I've written an article about saving pennies, losing thousands, and there's a different way of looking at purchasing, and getting down to lowest cost is not necessarily the best value. And I think the best suppliers these days are the true partners of the machine builders out there. And they work with the machine builders to make their machines better, make them more affordable for their end customers, and make more ROI for the machine builders. If you can find a supplier that's helping you do that as a machine builder, they're a great partner. And I think as we are at Mirror Electronic, I think that's our focus of our company here, that we do on a day-to-day basis. And we should probably mention that we do work at the same company.
Yes, I want to hear your background. I want to get you to introduce yourself. As I've taken this path, I find myself as a global director of Amazon for Mirror Electronics. So I'm specifically tied to Amazon, but Amazon is in fact an industry in itself and gigantic and global. And so I'm working at Mirror Electronic to bring connectivity solutions to this gigantic, fast-growing company. And that's how we found ourselves doing this together, because you yourself have spent some time at Mer Electronic and you have your own role. So why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah. Okay. So I've been at Mer Electronic for actually 7 years, coming up to 7 years. It will be 7 years pretty much when this podcast goes out. On that
Lucky 7.
anniversary. Yeah, lucky 7. So where did I start? I left school, and my first job, I was trained to kill people. I think it saved my life. And I left school and I joined the British Army. I spent the first 5 years of my life in the British Army.
I love it.
And I came out of the British Army, went back to school, got my degree in electronics, and ended up working for a small automation company while I was still at school on weekends, doing some part-time work. And my first job was really funny because the company was called Acme. You know, like the Roadrunner cartoons.
Wile E. Coyote.
The company was called Acme, but the acronym was Automation Control and Mechanical Engineering. So they really worked hard on that acronym and getting the name right. And I was dumped into doing relay logic to PLC upgrades. So we were retrofitting relay logic systems. But that was, Craig, that was before we had laptops. Okay, that was before we had software. That was with a handheld programmer, one rung at a time. Okay. And then you'd have to use the arrow buttons to go up and down the rungs if you had to make an edit, and it took forever. But you know what? It was a lot of fun. And from there, I progressed into another automation company. My boss started another company, took me with him, and I was the installation commissioning engineer for the whole of the UK, because I was living in the UK at that time. And I was twiddling my thumbs. They were trying to sell some machines. They didn't have any machines sold. So I'm sitting there waiting for a machine to be sold so I can go and commission it. And in the end, I said, why don't you just give me some brochures? And because I'd been to a whole bunch of...
Be there anyway.
I'd been to a whole bunch of manufacturing facilities doing installations and commissioning and repairs before that. I got to know some of the maintenance managers at those facilities. And I would go back and say, hey, Joe, you know that machine I worked on like 2 years ago and it was coming to the end of its life? Are you thinking about replacing that? And he says, yeah, actually, the budget's just been approved. We're going to replace that machine in 6 months, or 3 months. And hey, can I have an opportunity at quoting on that? And then I would, I would know the machine pretty well inside out, certainly from a controls point of view. And we would go away and quote the machine, and they knew us. We were familiar with them. The first few machines we sold that way. I actually sold the machines, and then I went back 6 weeks later, because it took about 6 weeks to build one of those machines back there. They weren't too big. And I would actually do this install and commissioning. I would change from a suit into my overalls.
I'm sure our listeners who have ever bought a machine would love that experience. The guy or gal who sells the machine installs it. Talk about accountability.
Yeah,
it better work.
It was. Yeah, it certainly was. And it teaches you a lot too. And then I came to Canada in 1995 on a vacation and liked it here. Decided to stay. Got my immigration papers sorted out, and got back into the automation industry here with a company called NCC Electronics, who were a STI safety company back then that's purchased by Omron later on. I was a sales engineer for them, and also YoCab, which has now been eaten up by ABB. YoCab safety relays were one of the first ones back then. So I worked in safety for a little while, and then from there I went to Omron. I was at Omron for 5, nearly 6 years. Spent a little bit of time at Motorman with robots. Yeah, I didn't like working with robots. It was a different type of sale, because I'm a controls guy at heart. I'm a PLC guy, and getting into the nitty gritty with controls people is what I love doing. And robots are capital equipment, and they do some cool things, but that sales process for me didn't fit. I was just working with finance people on massive budgets. It just wasn't for me. So I got back into PLC stuff, and now I've been at Mer Electronic for 7 years. I'm here as a director of business development. Love it. Love working with customers one-on-one, looking at their machines and helping them make them better, make them quicker, make them easier. And one of the things that I've really focused on recently is total cost of ownership. helping machine builders understand that a lot of them are still building their panels the old way, Craig. A lot of machine builders I see are still putting terminals in big control panel, central control panel, pulling wires and cables back there, terminating all those wires. And they are struggling with skilled labor. And skilled people are doing the terminating.
Yeah.
And so actually showing them how decentralized automation works and how, the skill level of the technician can be a lot lower when you're plugging in an M12 or an M8 connector as opposed to terminating terminal blocks. It makes a big difference. But that's what my love is right now, is going around and actually helping machine builders with decentralized automation. So
I think that's terrific. And I will confess that our conversations, which were very casual conversations about this topic, has helped me focus in on the severity and impact of the labor crisis that exists. I know it's pervasive in the Western world, that we don't really have a choice anymore. We must simplify the way that systems are built, because the craftsman mentality doesn't work anymore. We can't expect someone to be selecting wires and stripping them and putting them into terminal blocks and wringing out systems, then breaking it down and sending it on site and wringing it out again. And all these ways where labor is such a key factor. It's got to be plug and play now. I just don't see another way.
Well, and here's the thing: the controls engineers and electricians that are doing that termination, a lot of them are really experienced, and they're really being used on low-level tasks that don't need their skills. They need the skills on the programming and on the configurations and the testing. Well, as Wayne Dyer said, one of his famous quotes, one of my favorite quotes, is, when you look at something different, what you're looking at is different. Right? So
that's a great one.
When you look at the problem, a lot of the problem is that a lot of machine builders are having is they can't find enough controls people. So they're saying, we need more controls people. We need more electricians. We need more. And so they try and get them from competitors with, better benefits, better rates or whatever. And then they've got to try and keep them. Well, hang on. If we look at the problem differently, how do we build our machines and design them so we don't need as many controls people? And that's where decentralized automation really comes to the front, because we can simplify the I/O system of a whole machine really easily with remote I/O modules on the machine, close to where all the I/O is. Short cables, really quick connect. You can hire someone that's 18-year-old to start work on a Monday morning. You can train them in about 15 minutes to connect M12 connectors, align the notch, get the pins lined up, and actually tighten those into an I/O module. And if you've got a label on the cable and you've got a label on the port, then just match up 1 with 1 and 2 with 2. And you can have them working at that really quickly. You know what? The younger generations, they get fed up a little bit. Some of them do, and they might quit at lunchtime. Right? The nice thing is they can hire someone else to start right after lunch, and 15 minutes later, they're up to production. They're full speed. Imagine trying to do that with someone building a control panel and teaching them how to lay out wires through the wire ducts, make sure you've got the right lengths, strip them, ferrule them, connect them, check them, because you got to tug every one of them when to make sure it's tight, and then get them to do that consistently well. It takes months to be able to get someone up to speed on that. Oh, forgot the marking. You've got to mark the wire as well.
You better mark it correctly, and it better be the right length. And there's always the temptation, we've run out of 16 gauge. I'll just use 18 gauge for this. No one will ever know. It's fine. And now we have an issue, potential overheating.
Short circuit. There we go. And overload.
And then how many times in your decades of being out there in the field have you known someone to wire an output to an input, and then we let the smoke out, and now someone has an expensive module to replace, and on it goes. There's so many places. It's difficult to capture how many ways things can be expensive. There is a number I got from a very well-known large line builder, integrator, who said they spend 70% of their resources after they've purchased the equipment, after they've designed it, after they've built it once. They spend 70% of the resources once they get on site. because they're paying for
On
hotels.
rework.
They're
Yeah.
making sure things are right. Oops, this doesn't work. We've got to fix this. Oh my God, this blew up. I need a part. And so that is an incredible cost. And that could also be a cost if we're not live on March 1 and it's now March 15 and we're still not running and all that production's lost and all these people are standing around.
Oh,
It gets
penalties. Yeah,
huge quick.
penalties come in. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That's a good segue into what people coming in to listen to Machine Builder Talk can expect to hear. And I think the idea of our podcast was to bring people onto the show and really have a conversation about those challenges and about maybe some of the solutions to solve those challenges and get some different perspectives from different people from different areas and really help our listeners understand some of the challenges and maybe understand that some of those challenges they're experiencing, they're not alone. There are other people in the industry, another machine builder across the other side of the country who are having the same issues and the same problems. And if we all talk about it and we get it out there and we can try and solve those problems, you know how sometimes you meet one person, they've got one idea of how to solve something, and then you meet someone else and they've got a different idea of how to solve something, and then there's another person and they've got another idea of how to solve something. We have, just those 3 meetings, you've got 3 different solutions. And when you have, a problem like some of our listeners may have, and they hear someone on there how they've solved that problem, that can be really helpful to them. And they go,
No
oh
question.
my God, we've had that problem for years. Oh, that makes so much sense. And it might be something simple, but they've never thought about it from that particular angle. And I'm hoping that we get at least one of those or 2 of those in every one of our episodes, so that there's some real nuggets, some gold there for machine builders in every position, because we don't want to just be controls people or mechanical assemblers or CFO or engineering manager. And we're going to have all types of people on this show, and it's going to be really exciting to hear their perspective on some of the challenges that the machine builder world has and some of the ways they're solving them. I think it's really exciting.
Oh, it's definitely exciting. And you hit on something that's one of the core reasons listening to podcasts and having community around technologies, around any walk of life. There's a great book I recommend anyone who listens to this to read. It's called The Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki. And he brings forth the nugget of truth that is, usually one person doesn't have all the answers, but in the crowd, there is the answer, and it can be the full answer. And so when we talk about these things and it adjusts someone's understanding by sharing knowledge, it can be revolutionary. Believe it or not, that's how they find subs that are missing in the ocean. They'll take information from all different places and be able to get to a zone in the ocean that's very close to where that thing actually is. But no one person has that data. So it's a great book I recommend. But
that reminds me of the term tribal knowledge.
Yes. In fact, you brought that up.
Right.
Talk to us about tribal knowledge. What does that mean to you?
So tribal knowledge is exactly the same type of concept, is that as a group, it really originates from old times where you had a tribe of people. And over time, the tribe of people would teach new members of the tribe that coming up through the ages, they were born, and they would teach them how to hunt, how to catch fish, how to find the right berries. And the tribal knowledge was really important because it kept people alive. They learned from their elders, and all those skills were passed on through the years. Okay. And so it was really important to try and keep the tribe together, because if it started splitting up, all that knowledge went in so many different directions. And sometimes, that would happen. Someone would leave the tribe and wander off and find another tribe. And some of the things they've learned at the previous tribe becomes new knowledge for the new tribe. Right. So it's how knowledge was spread, but it was very sporadic for people to leave a tribe. So it would be one person leaving. So in the modern age, keeping your talent, your key people together as a team is one of the challenges we have, because of the tribal knowledge and all the experience they have across the board, from installs to building to design. And over a period of time, when we're working together as a group, we gain this ability to talk to each other without talking to each other. We can communicate without talking because we understand how the other person works and what the other person already understands. We know we don't have to explain how to do that to them because they've already been taught that. And if we're getting to a bit of a crisis point now because of the generations of people retiring. And that's what's causing the skilled labor shortage, because at one time you could get an electrician just by putting an ad in the paper, or that's what it would have been, an ad in the paper back then, right? We're showing how old we are now. But tribal knowledge is the same. All of our experienced people, or some of the older experienced people, are leaving and retiring. The challenge now is, how do we transfer everything they know to the younger generations that are coming through in that short period of time we have
left? There's no mechanism. There really isn't a mechanism. We don't have a true apprenticeship program here. Germany, I know, has a pretty decent apprenticeship methodology with engineers and technical skills, but we don't hand this stuff down. And the discontinuity of COVID caused, I believe, 19 million people in the US who were baby boomers to just say, I've got enough money, I'm going to go home, I'm done working. And all this craftsman knowledge left immediately, and there was no way to transfer it. And then it just got really bad really fast for that reason. And that's just one piece of the labor crisis we're dealing with, just one piece of it.
Yeah.
The other thing is things have changed so dramatically that what used to be maybe a PLC-based system is now a PC-based system, or it has been networked to another system that someone's not familiar with. I know working with Amazon, but it's true of any large company. A group in this cubicle will not share anything with the group in that cubicle, and yet they're dealing with the same problems. And that's just a cultural thing that everyone's on their own, and hopefully we can make some difference in machine building. Making a forum whereby there's transparency to say, here's some best practices we've seen, or here's something that doesn't work. And one of my favorite things to talk about colleagues about, tell me about when things went really, really badly, when something exploded, something went so badly, and what can we learn from that? And I get people talking about that. Usually it's later in the evening and maybe a beer or two has been drunk, but then we talk about, wow, here's something that went really bad and I thought I was going to lose my job, but we learned something. That can be fun to talk about as well. I'm not sure all of our interviewees will agree to tell all their dirt, but there's certainly to be learned from that as well.
I'm sure there'll be lots of guests that have some interesting stories. That is going to be the fun part that we have as hosts of this show, is the stories that we'll get to hear, the knowledge that we'll get to gain just as the host by talking to our guests on the show. And speaking of guests, we are kicking off our first guest in 2 weeks from today. Okay, so we're just for the listeners out there, the plan is to launch a new episode every Tuesday. Sorry, every other Tuesday, should I say. And so 2 weeks from today, we have a guest on the show. His name is Jonathan Darling. Okay, some of you people might know him out there because he's quite the legend. If you hang out on LinkedIn, you'll see Jonathan Darling on there. And he is one of the super minds of automation in this day and age. He's got a great mind of how we can solve problems like the labor shortages. Okay, how we can transfer the knowledge from the experienced older people that are starting to retire to the younger generations. And he's got an intellect that it is hard to fathom how deep it goes, because you can go on some really deep conversations with him. But I'm really excited to have him as our first guest on the show. And so you got to tune in 2 weeks for Jonathan Darling. That's for sure.
He's one of the great communicators in this space. And I met him only about 6 months ago, and I was told that I needed to meet him by two guys, both named Jordan, who worked for him. And they said, we were just having a conversation, and they said, you've got to meet him. And of course, JD was in the other room on a phone call, and then another phone call. But eventually I was able to speak with him, and we talked for about 30 minutes. And I could tell he has such a passion for what he does and a passion for people and developing teams. And that's a rare skill. That's a rare combination of skills. So I know he's going to have a great
Yeah,
stuff to
actually,
talk to us about.
JD hired both of those Jordans, and they're called the Jordans. And those two are really young generation. Talking about young generation, they get a bad rap, but you know what? There's a lot of good kids out there that blow me away with how much enthusiasm they have and the energy they put into it. And the Jordans are both of the Jordans are two examples of that, of great young people coming up into the industry. So yeah, JD's going to be on the show. Really excited to have him as a first guest. So we're going to have a blast with him. And that might go over into 2 episodes because I think it's going to be a long conversation. But anyway, Craig, we should probably start wrapping up on this first episode and say, hey, thank you for listening to the first ever episode of Machine Builder Talk. And I'm going to sign off and wish you all great the next 2 weeks and hand you off to Craig for him to say goodbye.
Thanks for listening in. If you've made it this long into the podcast, that means you're automatically going to be in our tribe, if I could use the tribal word. And we do promise to bring interesting insights, to keep it lively, to delve into topics that really affect industry in general. And we've used the term machine, by the way. It's such a general term. It covers a lot of industries. And so we're going to have guests from all over who really bring great insight and interesting stories. So please stay with us. And we're looking forward to speaking with you soon.
And if you want to get more information about the show, visit machinebuildertalk.com. So that's all one word. So machinebuildertalk.com for more information about the show. And also, if it's your first ever episode, please hit that subscribe button to make sure you get notified of the next episode. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Find us at machinebuildertalk.com and wherever you listen to interesting podcasts. We encourage you to subscribe and to reach out with your comments and questions. Until next time, make it great.